This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
Breakout as the cost of living crisis continues to grip the country. Residents were seen chanting songs and carrying placards with several inscriptions in Mokola, Songo and Iwo areas of Ibadan, the state capital. Some of the inscriptions said, quote, "End food hike and inflation. The poor are starving," and "Tinubu, don't forget your promises." Armed police officers were reportedly present at the scene of the protest. Similar demonstrations have been held in Sokoto, Kano, and Niger states. For more details out of Ibadan, we are joined by Adenike Kafi, a journalist with Daily Trust. Good morning, Ms. Kafi. Thank you for joining us on the conversation.
Good morning. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Can you give us the latest as far as these protests in Oyo State are concerned?
Okay. Yesterday, 20th January 2024, the End Hunger, End Hardship protest place in Ibadan, Oyo State capital. And so far, it was a peaceful protest. There was no record of fighting or hijacking of the protest by hoodlums. So, the protest was basically a call, an outcry by youth, majorly. Most of the protesters were youth, calling on the government to end the hardship, the economic hardship being experienced by Nigerians, especially the soaring price of goods, especially food items and drugs. So that was basically what happened yesterday.
Can you tell us if the state government went out to meet them or if any officials whatsoever went out to talk with the protesters?
Yes, the protesters moved from Mokola and eventually ended the protest at the state secretariat, Agodi Ibadan. So far, there has been nothing. There has been no response from the state government. However, the state police, the PPRO of the Oyo State Police Command, that Adewale Osifeso, addressed journalists yesterday. While addressing us, he said they were on ground. The police were on ground to ensure the safety and protection of the rights of the protesters, so that hoodlums will not hijack it. That and so far there has been no violence. It has been peaceful. So we're still waiting for the government to send a response. But up to this moment, we have no response from the government.
Right. So, if I'm to understand this, did the government say wait for our response, or are the protests? Is there any indication that the protests will continue today as well?
The protesters didn't indicate that the protest is going to continue. The intonation I was giving was that this is something that concerns all Nigerians, not only people of Ibadan, not only people of Oyo State. One of the protesters was saying yesterday that this is a fight for all. This is an issue that concerns every Nigerian. So that even if the protest stops in Ibadan, it is still going. It will. He was saying that it was on in other places. So maybe the government, the protesters were not directly protesting against the Oyo State government. Let's assume that is the reason why the Oyo State government has not didn't face them yesterday, didn't address them yesterday. Most of the chants, most of the slogans, most of the protest words were directed against the federal government as the president of Nigeria.
Ms. Kafi, let me ask you this. Did you get a sense that the protests were sporadic, or were they organized by some group or association?
So far, we have no hints if a group or organization was behind the protest. But what we know is that 4 days before the protest, before yesterday, flyers had been distributed and announcements had been made in markets, among student organizations, student unions, groups, that End Hunger protest is going to go on yesterday. So it was well coordinated. There was no fighting. It was well organized. But so far, so good. We cannot pin it to a face or to an organization. So it's just like a collective effort of youth.
Ms. Kafi, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this information with us. Our guest, Adenike Kafi, is a journalist with Daily Trust based in Oyo State, where we saw protests break out in different parts of Ibadan, the state capital, yesterday. Residents took to the streets in demonstration against the high cost of living.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
President Bola Tinubu and Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva have discussed opportunities for collaboration in aviation between the two countries. These discussions included the possibility of establishing direct flights between Lagos and Sao Paulo. A statement released by a senior special advisor to the president on public engagement says that President Tinubu also highlighted possible partnerships between the NNPCL and its Brazilian counterpart Petrobras, while President Lula pledged to enhance bilateral ties during his remaining 3 years in office. Joining us to discuss the potential of trade between the two countries is Chika Emmanuel. Mr. Emmanuel is president of the Nigerians in Diaspora Brazil chapter. Good morning and welcome to the conversation, Mr. Emmanuel.
Good morning and thank you for having me, Nabila.
It's a pleasure to have you on. Let's start off with just your reactions to these initial engagements between our president and the president of Brazil.
I think it was a very nice gesture in the right direction, actually. It's been long expected, and I'm glad that both presidents were able to meet and talk about the pressing needs on both sides, because Brazil has a lot to offer to Nigeria. We need Brazil in different areas, so it was a very good one.
Right, Mr. Emmanuel, you basically are in part of the Nigerians in diaspora as far as Brazil is concerned. But I also know that there is a certain African, or if you like more directly, Yoruba community that's indigenous to Brazil. Is that community interested in visiting, to use the popular term, the homeland, in the numbers that would, I guess, make this particular decision beneficial?
Thank you, Stephen, for this very intelligent question here. This is one of the things NIDO Brazil is fighting for. Just a few weeks ago, I had a meeting with one of those leaders, one of those Brazilian black groups, and they have been excited about the whole thing. So what we're doing now is that we're going to start engaging them very seriously to see how we can, with the federal government of Nigeria, plan a way to bring them home for them to really know where they come from. Yes, we have lots of them in the northeast of Brazil, that's in Bahia and Salvador. And this is a very welcome development. So they would be glad to visit Nigeria, of course. Go to places like Oyo, Ibadan, and all those places. So yes, we're working in that direction.
Mr. Emmanuel,
and just to mention that
yes, please go ahead.
Sorry, just to quickly mention that the culture aspect, the Nigerian culture is very present here in Brazil. It was very evident during the last concluded carnival. It was just amazing.
So there is a more critical question on why aviation and whether there's enough traffic between our two countries to justify this partnership. Perhaps you can shed some more light for us. Is aviation the way to go? If yes, why? Or are there other partnerships in other sectors we should be exploring?
See, this is exactly one of the reasons why I found this meeting with President Lula and President Tinubu very interesting. Years back, the trade balance between Brazil and Nigeria was about $10.2 billion. Somehow it just plummeted to 1.6 billion. That's a huge difference. Now, without a direct flight, it would be very difficult for them to re-engage and make this happen again. Now, let me state some of the areas and why I think it's important to make sure that we have this as quickly as possible. Brazil has a population of over 200 million, and I can boldly tell you that food is not a problem in Brazil at all. Brazil is a giant producer of agricultural products. Brazil supplies the whole world. Nigeria has over 200 million people to feed as well, right? So I was thinking that this engagement with Brazil is just going to be a game changer. We know some of the challenges we're facing home right now to feed our people. So we could just get the Brazilian people along and make this happen.
Mr. Emmanuel, if I may, I mean, that sounds more like Brazil is going to be on a better, will be left better than when we first started the partnership. It means that they would be better off essentially, because we do have capacity to feed our people, or rather we're supposed to build capacity, but we have what it takes. It's just that the infrastructure isn't there. There are other issues that we have as well. And you said without a direct flight, we won't be able to recapture what has been lost. But that $10 billion of trade existed even without a direct flight, if I'm not mistaken. Is it a question of politics? And I wonder what you think Nigeria stands to gain to be better off with this partnership.
Nabila, we had a direct flight at that time. There was a Brazilian carrier called Varig. So that was quite important because, for example, right now, for a businessman to travel from Sao Paulo to Lagos or vice versa, you would need about 26 hours to do that. So that's not really encouraging. Whereas one could fly from Rio de Janeiro or Bahia just within 7 hours to get to Lagos. So that would enhance trade in all aspects of it. And I see that beyond just a direct flight, it's wealth generation on both sides. Yes, the trade balance may not be that, it may not be an equal game at the beginning, but we can tap into the technological aspects of the Brazilian agriculture. So we can work with Embrapa, which is a Brazilian research institution in the area of agriculture, to improve things back home. And in a very short time, we'll be able to compete on level grounds. We may not just get it right 100% right now, but I think that is going to be a very good start. And let me also mention the health area here in Brazil. There's something they do that we find very interesting. They have a national health service called SUS, which is to say that anyone from any part of Brazil, including we Nigerians, can simply walk into a health center and get treated. It could be a surgery, it could be whatever, for free. It's not as sophisticated as the ones you have in the US, but it works perfectly well for Brazil. So those are very simple solutions I think we should be looking at.
Mr. Emmanuel, thank you very much for speaking with us this morning. Our guest on the conversation, Mr. Chika Emmanuel, is the president of Nigerians in Diaspora Brazil chapter, and he joined us to speak on conversations between Nigeria and Brazil about the opportunities for collaboration in aviation between these two countries. We ask you to stay tuned. The conversation continues on Now Breakfast.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
President Bola Tinubu has told leaders at the African Union Summit that Nigeria is ready to host the African Central Bank in line with the Abuja Treaty of 1991. This treaty lays the foundation for the establishment of an African common market and will see the creation of a common currency across the continent. Speaking in Ethiopia over the weekend, President Tinubu promised to engage with the AU Commission and other member states to ensure that the bank comes into effect by 2028. Radio Now's Bosun Omofaye joins us now to discuss what the establishment of an African central bank would mean for the Nigerian economy and the Naira. Good morning and welcome, Bosun.
Thank you, Nabila. Good morning.
It's good to have you on. Let's start off with just what your initial thoughts are when you hear the president's pledge.
Well, the idea of an African central bank was first disclosed about a year or so ago, and I'll go back to that. But straight to what President Tinubu said, I think it was the best thing to have said. We needed to have put our feet forward, and I think this is one good news for Nigeria if we can host the headquarters of a single central bank for Africa, like the European Central Bank that you have in Brussels, for example. Now, the whole idea is that we've missed out on a number of opportunities in the past. For example, and I'll go very quickly, the AFDB, the African Development Bank, Nigeria was one of the pioneers and today the largest shareholder in the AFDB. We lost that opportunity to host the headquarters of AFDB in Nigeria, whether Lagos or Abuja or whatever, and we lost it to Cote d'Ivoire. Then the African Export-Import Bank. The African Bank was the idea of creating an African Export-Import Bank was mooted in Abuja, Nigeria, 30 years ago. But we also lost the opportunity of hosting the African Bank headquarters to Egypt. Then the AfCFTA, the New African Continental Free Trade Area, the Secretariat for it, we didn't put our best foot forward until we lost it to Ghana. As we speak today, it has positioned Ghana as the very major destination, not only for investment, but it raises the profile of Ghana, for example. So we've lost at least three. If I could just stop there. We've lost three.
So, Bosun, let me interrupt you and ask you this, because, just beyond the bank being located here, what exactly does it mean, first for the Nigerian economy, but also just for the continent across the board?
Well, the idea behind the African Central Bank was because as President Ichilema of Zambia said at the AU over the weekend, and has been said by a few other African countries like Nana Akufo-Addo, who is a very big champion of Africa, making sure that we have our own institutions that will address our own problems and not necessarily going to the World Bank and the IMF. An African Central Bank that will be populated by African economists, African research people, folks who will look at the real problems that Africa has and give Africa a fair assessment of our political, social, economic, climate, whatever problems we have on the continent, and come up with homegrown solutions. That's the idea that the African Union is piloting. And this is really good. We've put up the AfCFTA, the Intra-Africa Trade Fair, and a few other things. Now we need to put on the financial system or a central bank that can help us regulate the entire banking in Africa. Now, yes, another point is that we also don't get fair risk assessment when we talk to insurance companies in Africa that come to lift our crude oil or carry our mining products like gold, diamond, platinum, whatever. So they charge us excessively, Nabila. They charge us several billions of dollars in excess because they say Africa has a higher risk quotient in terms of risk assessment. Then you have the rating agents, the S&P, the Moody's, the Fitch, and the rest of them. Sometimes there's a whole lot of disagreements that they don't really understand because they're sitting in London, New York, Frankfurt, Paris, whatever it is called, and they make assessments of Africa risk without really living it here in this country, and in Africa, and understanding really the nuances of day-to-day life and doing business in Africa. What governments in Africa really face is different from every other countries in the world.
Indeed.
So because they don't understand all of this, so they put a higher risk premium on Africa. So if you want to go to the bond, you want to raise bond like you have Benin Republic did in the last few weeks. You have Cote d'Ivoire, then Kenya just came into the market about the last week or so. The risk premium that we pay international creditors as far as raising bonds from the global market, including our banks and other institutions, Access Bank, First Bank, the rest of them, that raise bonds, globally speaking, Fidelity Bank and the rest, and every other bank across Africa, we pay higher premium because they say, look, our rating agency said, you guys are very risky. But what if we have our own risk rating agency? So the African Union is also not just working on an African central bank, but also working on a single rating agency for Africa.
So,
we're 55 countries. We should have some of this in-house so that we can deal with these issues on our own and present a picture of our own to the rest of the world. Not all the time.
Let me interrupt you. Because of time, I'm hoping that you can tie this up for us. I'm thinking about the possible road bumps that we will face. You mentioned the free trade area, which is not fully effective just yet in terms of just its capacity. Also, this bank could likely see the establishment of a single currency across the continent. I think about the eco and the sub-regional level here in West Africa and how we've been unable to even get that off. So when you consider these things, what are the issues that we will face and how to just overcome them?
Nabila, let's go back, read in history. How many years? When was the idea of a European Union mooted? And when did you have the common trade within the European Union? It took several decades down the line. It didn't happen overnight. Look, these folks look very sexy and nice today. It looks like they know what they are doing. But did they know what they were doing 50, 70 years ago? When they started the idea, when they started having a common currency, they've built institutions that are helping them today that some of us are begging to be part of. Look at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the EBRD. Look, many African countries, including Nigeria, in the northern part of the corridor of the continent, benefit so much from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. But this was set up after the World War II. How many years ago was that? 1945, 1948. Look, if we don't start putting something together today, nobody will expect the AFCFTA to be the poster authority, to be running at full in a year or two or three or four or five. Not just about 50-something countries in Europe. We're talking about 55 countries, more politically, structurally, religious, socially, everywhere, and all dominated by different political, geopolitical powers all over the world. So African leaders are beginning. Now, the good news is this, to summarize it, that the African Leaders Union is beginning to see the benefits of not just having political discussions, but having social, economic trade and investment discussions that put our money where our mouth is, and our mouth where our money is. We cannot always go begging others outside without investing in ourselves. The APPO, for example, which is the umbrella body for all African oil producers, is moving to set up an African energy bank in which a certain percentage of crude oil price produced by Nigeria, Angola, Cameroon, Ghana, wherever, will be put in that particular bank so that we need money for infrastructure and investment within the Africa's energy sector. All of this has to be happening right now, rather than us always begging from outside.
Right.
We wasted so much money. Our political leaders have frittered away so much excess crude accounts, so much oil money on the African continent. Now we are beginning to think in an investment science and business terms, and I think that is one thing that the African Union should be well praised for. That for the first time, we are seeing that the world is not really moving in that direction in a manner of speaking. Everybody is making pledges. Look at the climate change. Look at
let's we've got to leave it here, unfortunately, but I am appreciative of you giving us all this context, and perhaps we will be here in 2028 to discuss when the African Central Bank actually takes off. But thank you, Bosun, for your time and your insight.
I'll be happy to see headquarters in Nigeria.
And we will talk when that happens. Our guest, Radio Now's Bosun Omofaye, speaking to us on President Bola Tinubu's pledge and promise to see the establishment of the African Central Bank by the deadline of 2028 here in Nigeria. Something we wait and watch to see if it does come into fruition.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
Fostering inclusive development and access to digital public infrastructure in government offices nationwide. This project will collaborate with the Nigerian Communications Satellite Limited and Galaxy Backbone and is expected to create at least 300 direct jobs. The ministry hopes that Project 774 LG connectivity will drive transformation and unlock opportunities that will deliver sustainable development to all through the power of connectivity. For an analysis of the project and its potential, we're joined by Ade Atobatele, the CEO at Remarkable Ideas Limited. Mr. Atobatele, good morning and thank you for joining us on the conversation.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
What is your reaction to this particular project?
It looks as if the minister is trying to get everybody to swim upstream together. Right now, we've been in a pool, and everybody's been going in different directions. And I think he has convinced everybody, definitely convinced civil servants that there will be large efficiencies if everybody should pull together and row in the same direction.
Are you sure? Are you sure it's not a bit hopeful? Or I don't know what the word is, to say that he's convinced everybody to kind of swim in the same direction?
Well, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and so you can't bake the cake without putting the ingredients down. So I believe he had another project that got all the servants together, and I've been hearing good things. That at last they believe that they have been recognized And I think that he's building the 774 on the top of that project when 777 now wants to shine, for lack of a better Nigerian word. They also want to shine, and this is really their project.
So it's a project that aims at connecting all the local governments in Nigeria, and the basic focus here is to deliver service.
That's right.
Perhaps I don't know if I'm asking you to run the rule over our local government so far, but the idea of digitizing public records, public infrastructure is not exactly something that Nigeria seems to be on board with at the moment, and I'm using seems to be on board with at the moment as my way to address this. You have also pointed out that it feels like it looks as though the minister is trying to get everyone to swim upstream. So do you sense any amount of difficulty in this project being actualized? And what would that difficulty be, really?
Even if everybody wanted to swim upstream, change is difficult. So the mere fact that this is a project whereby we will end up doing things in a different way that we have done them before means that it's not going to be plain safe. There will always be those that want to keep the status quo. People that have been in the system for a long time do not like change. Nobody likes change. So yes, it is actually a difficult project to do. But as I said, I believe that the morale is changing. The things that may not change are the things that are the individuals, the gatekeepers of information, who will no longer be gatekeepers of information because everybody will now have access to information. Those are the places that he's got to find and convince or get rid of.
So, one of the, I guess, commendable bits of this project is that the minister has roped in two existing agencies. You've got the Nigerian Communications Satellite Limited and also Galaxy Bone. This speaks to the collaborative effort we typically talk about across government. How do you see this partnership working out?
Really, Galaxy Backbone really should be under the Ministry of Communications. That would make it a little bit easier because every time you go across territorial lines, there is some sort of friction. But by involving them and making them the key supplier of this information, he has actually laid down the challenge, because the challenge will not be the failure will be Galaxy Backbones.
So there's always the human angle involved in every single conversation around government interventions, government projects. This project is touted to produce some 300 jobs directly. I would like to balance these 300 jobs on the one hand versus what else would make this project the sort of legacy project that I guess this administration could come to be known for.
I wouldn't measure the success of the project by the 300 jobs. If you think about it, that's like three or four jobs a local government, not up to 10 per local government. So that's it's not an employment drive; it's an efficiency drive. And if people can get the information they need out of government, the government can get the information that they need out of people more efficiently, everybody goes home nicely. I mean, for example, let's look at the recent passport. I know that's not local government, but now that passports are moving faster, everybody is happy. I mean, where government needs to provide local services or services to the people, the question is, what is stopping them from doing it? And it's usually information. If this information goes faster, everybody goes home happy.
I want to tie this, beyond the human aspects, I want to go back to the sector in particular. This connectivity does involve telecoms, and for years we've been talking about the ability of the telecom sector to expand infrastructurally. We've also been talking about whether that is profitable for the private sector, for the private players within the sector. Here, with government kind of spearheading this expansion, I wonder whether you see any sort of, I don't know if the word is a clash or just the impact, let's put it that way, because it could be positive or negative, between this project and the telecoms players.
The NCC has a fund that is supposed to help parts of the country that are not competitively run to have information. So even if a telco doesn't go to a particular place or a particular local government and there's not one there is a fund in the NCC that can fund that. It would be to the telco's detriment not to play ball with this, because once you've tasted the ice cream, most people want to get a second bite of it or second lick of it. So if all these local governments start to see an efficiency, their salaries come better, the taxes come better, the health care is delivered better, and it's not the telcos that are delivering it, it's just Galaxy Backbone, and Galaxy Backbone is bypassing one telco over another, then it becomes a competitive market. And the telcos themselves will have to start asking themselves why they weren't there in the first place.
Now, I see that positive in terms of how much better it makes the market. But the human angle still, I guess, gives me some concern. If we're talking about making sure that our 774 local government areas are connected, is there a learning gap here? And I'm asking this because we are in a time when information is at our fingertips. We all have cell phones, or a large part of Nigeria's population has access to the internet via cell phones and the laptops that are available. But is there still a gap between what we want to achieve and the skill sets of the people who will drive this particular achievement? I'm talking about those who are currently in the local government positions. Is there a gap, and do we need to, fill that gap?
There's always going to be a gap. Technology moves on. It's not static. Last year, we were talking about AI. There's a huge gap in Lagos and anywhere else that you want to call urban about who knows about AI and who doesn't. That gives them a competitive advantage. But people catch up. There is another benefit to this that people might not have known. Once you've got a for lack of a better word, outpost where there is a significant amount of bandwidth, it becomes a small thing to now make that bandwidth available also to the community. Remember, this is not commercially driven. This is government driven. So all of a sudden, there will be bandwidth places that may not be commercially viable before, but all of a sudden that viability becomes available, and as a consequence, financial inclusion, health inclusion, government inclusion, all of those things on top of the local governments themselves being included.
And I guess that's perhaps where we will come to end this conversation. Tech is only as good as it is if it has zero impact on communities and development. And the minister does take note of that, right? Because in the document that they published, which lists the whole scope of Project 774 connectivity, they speak on things like healthcare, education, waste management, infrastructure development, and they're also pretty excited about how this will bring some sort of connectivity to local government secretariats across the country. So I guess that's why I want you to give us final thoughts as a tech person. When you think about how it should be used for social development and welfare, what your expectations are from the other arms of government and just keying into this project.
For me, this is a dream come true because, as I said, once you've tasted the ice cream, you want a second lick. Most of the people that we're talking about have not had access to telco apart from the thing that's inside their hand, either a mobile phone or a smartphone. They haven't had access to all the bells and whistles that you get in very urban areas. But once they start seeing the benefits, they're not going to want to go back. You cannot put that smoke back to the bottle. And so they're going to start making demands. And once they start making demands, that means that there's more capacity is going to be needed. And the question that you were asking before, whether there is technical capacity, that capacity will arrive because there will be a demand for it.
Mr. Atobatele, thank you very much for speaking with us this morning on Tech Now. Our guest, Mr. Ade Atobatele, is the CEO at Remarkable Ideas Limited, and he joined us this morning on Tech Now to talk about the federal government's Project 774 LG Connectivity. It is a program that's designed to provide reliable internet connectivity to all the local government areas in Nigeria, with a focus on service delivery to the Nigerian people. That's where we drop the anchor as far as tech conversations are concerned, but the conversation itself continues on Now Breakfast as we switch to Community Watch in just a moment. Do stay with us.
We are intentional.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.